Hello YouTube, Proxy here, and I said in my last news update that I would get around to doing an analysis on the combat sneak peek they gave us on the live stream. And well, just as I was about to go to sleep, Intrepid dropped another video displaying PAX content labelled as PAX West Pre-Alpha Tutorial. But before I begin, a generic disclaimer that the game is in pre-Jurassic, before the Big Bang ever happened or didn't happen, alpha. As such, everything discussed in this video is subject to change, and any viewpoints and opinions are of my own and do not represent Intrepid Studios. Now, this clip does not show off any real gameplay, it's just a mage walking up to a tower and throwing some skills at it. Now, some of the community members got pretty excited by seeing this, but I can't help but feel they jumped the gun a little bit in expressing how amazing it is. After all, this clip's purpose wasn't really for showing off the combat, as it was more to explain how the PAX arena system works, which essentially is a domination-style PvP arena with its own little twists and rule sets. So let's move on to the PAX tutorial video that was released. Now, the fact Ashes of Creation won't have an auto-attack feature is interesting, though I wouldn't mind if there was some way to use a basic attack in some regard, which could be manually activated per swing or shot. I think the lack of an auto-attack makes the combat look visually slow, but it seems there's enough button input so that it feels like it's not slow, just slow visually. Now, the animations of the player have certainly improved since the last combat footage we saw earlier this year, and the spell effects are pretty decent. They could use a little more polish, but as far as an alpha content goes, it's absolutely fine. In terms of the amount of skills, and a lot of the other features such as the dual class system are not in yet, and some other things are just missing at the moment, which is fine. This is a setup for PAX testing after all. The UI has certainly improved, and I like the minimalist design, and it doesn't feel too cluttered with useless widgets and elements. But there is definitely one thing that I'd like to see changed, and that's this little bar here. During skill use it appears, and if you time it right and hit the little yellow bar, it would appear you do more damage with a combo effect. Okay, fine, I don't mind that overly too much, however the way it's implemented has some flaws in my opinion. The first of which is that it's at the bottom of my screen. Now, Ashes of Creation is graphically beautiful as a game, except for some reason the graphics seem turned down in this version, I'm not sure why. However, I want to look at it. Secondly, I need to be able to see what my opponent or opponents are doing in order to counter their abilities and show their movements. And honestly, that's going to be annoying as hell if I have to spend 50% of my time playing looking at a bar at the bottom of my screen. I mean, it's pretty much like having a goddamn QuickTime event within combat, and I don't really think anyone thinks, oh gee, I can't wait to get to the cutscenes in Resident Evil 5 so I can do the super fun QuickTime events. Because you end up at looking at what buttons you need to press instead of enjoying the beautiful cutscenes, or in Ash's case, enjoying the combat. Now, this could be easily fixed in a couple of ways. One way I would do this is simply move these QuickTime event bars or class combo meters or whatever you want to call them to become more central within the UI. And that would be most likely the easiest fix. However, what I would suggest would be to simply change it to a visual element rather than a UI element. How would I achieve this? Well, quite simple. For this example, I'll be borrowing some footage from a tech demo of spells in Unity 3D. Notice how this guy casts spells, and the colour of these spells can be changed. Well, the suggestion would be to change it so that instead of looking at the bar at the bottom of the screen on where to time the reaction button press, the spell would change colour or effect to let you know when to use this button press or reaction. This means you'll be able to focus on the fight and can pay more attention to what your opponent is doing, and that would leave you to only have to glance at other areas of the UI such as your skill cooldowns and your minimap. Also, an animation queue effect for activating skills would also work well. There's a few other ways it could be changed for the better, but as it stands it basically feels like one of those Final Fantasy XIV minigames and turned into a combat element. And I think this is one of those things that needs to go back to the drawing board with, in my opinion. Another concern with having such a timing system like this is whether it will be affected by a live environment, especially in large-scale PvP by lag, or if it can be manipulated by a third-party program to essentially bypass the need to even engage in the mechanic at all. Also to note, when you see a ranger do a charge-up attack, the bar fills up, but honestly this could be easily turned into purely a visual cue without the bar element in my opinion. In terms of the classes we have seen so far, none of the abilities stand out exceptionally new or innovative. Most are things that have been done before in some regard. This isn't necessarily a bad thing though. When I look at the overall combat of Ashes of Creation, it seems pretty standard fare, and I think it will most likely remain this way until we start seeing augmented abilities from the second classes come into play. I think for a game that is in pre-alpha, or what would have been 5 years ago just an alpha, without the pre slapped in front, Ashes of Creation is certainly looking better than it did 10 months ago. In fact, it's a fairly big improvement from what it was. But is it revolutionary? No, Ashes of Creation node system might be, but the combat system? Not yet. And it has a very long way to go before it could even be considered as such. It needs to evolve, it needs to have some new ideas and fresh concepts. It needs to feel impactful and have a good level of interaction with visual cues and animations and spell effects. And to move away from using UI-based quick-time events or minigames during combat. It's quite clear Intrepid Studios have quite a distance to go if they hope to create that MMORPG that will truly revitalise the MMORPG genre. And even though I'm being critical of some elements of what they have done so far, I'm still rooting for them to pull it off. And I hope this constructive feedback might be of use to them in some way, because I want this game to succeed, flourish and grow. So do you think my assessment is fair so far, or is it just me being too harsh? Let me know in the comments below guys, and leave your own thoughts on the combat system below. If it gets the most likes, I'll pin it to the top for the others to read, and maybe Intrepid will read it. And as always guys, thanks for watching even for little rants like this.